Армысыздар, құрметті достар, это канал Не Крултай. Сегодня мы обсуждаем события, которые происходят на Ближнем Востоке. К нам сегодня в гости пришел Яв Быстрицкий, посол Израиля в Казахстане. Я сразу хочу предупредить, что наш канал, мы поддерживаем внешний курс нашей страны, мы поддерживаем дипломатическую позицию президента Токаева, и мы занимаем нейтралитет и, безусловно, выступаем за журналистскую справедливость. Поэтому мы обратились также в иранское посольство, мы написали им официальное письмо, мы доставили печатную версию в посольство Ирана и сказали: в любой момент вы можете обратиться к нам, мы приедем куда надо с техникой, запишем и дадим вам изложить ваши аргументы. Конечно же, и даже вот то, что я сейчас говорю, является повторением этого официального приглашения. Если посольство Ирана хочет изложить свои аргументы, мы готовы. Главное быть готовым к честной дискуссии, потому что мы зададим вопросы, которые могут оказаться некомфортными. Посольство Израиля согласилось на это, и мы сделаем это интервью на английском языке, субтитры будут в описании. Thank you, Mr. Ambassador, for coming here, for your readiness to answer quite and acute questions. 2.5 years ago, we made the same, after the tragedy of October of 2023, we made the same interview with your predecessor, and it was quite a deep discussion. So, the first question, the military operation against Iran began during the sacred Ramadan fasting. So, was it just a coincidence, or was it a strategic step to attack the Muslim country while the population of this country is fasting?
Well, thank you, Mr. Bishop, for having me today, and it is a great pleasure, and I really look forward to answer questions and to explain the position of the Israeli government and the Israeli people. And I have to say from the beginning that we have no beef, we have no argue with the Iranian people or with any other Muslim country. What we saw in the last, I would say, 8 months since the campaign in June 2025 is that the Iranian regime is escalating its actions and doing whatever it can to obscure the development of the nuclear program, the recuperating from the last campaign with regard to the ballistic missile, and everything that they're doing is going underground. So we understood that it's high time to take action before all this ability, this malign activity, this destructive approach will be out of sight and out of control.
But why during the sacred Ramadan? Why not 3 weeks later, for example?
Well, we saw with our intelligence, not only ours, and of course with the American allies, that this is an imminent action that has to be taken. We cannot withstand, we cannot hold for more, because certain things, certain components of the ballistic missile program, of the nuclear program, will be in this position that it will be out of reach.
After Ramadan is finished, you mean in 3 weeks Iran would be much stronger?
If we will not have taken this action, yes, Iran would be not only much stronger, but beyond the point of control, beyond the point of monitoring, beyond the point of reach of any other kinetic or any other action that can actually take out these capabilities.
Okay, so it was just a coincidence that military action began.
Of course.
Yeah. 22 years ago, Colin Powell, Secretary of State of United States, he actually screamed that Iraq has a weapon of mass destruction, chemical weapon, right? But eventually we do understand that it was a false fact, right? You now say that, mentioned that your intelligence claims that Iran becoming stronger on a daily basis. Can you later prove your claims with hard evidences that Iran is really ready to one step from becoming nuclear?
Well, I cannot show here the raw material and the raw footage and the raw intelligence that Israel has, other Western countries has, the US has, and many of our allies, including the IAEA, the International Agency for Nuclear Energy, has, that actually show what the Iranians are capable of and what they developed. It is a common knowledge of many intelligence and governments around the world that the Iranians have around 400 to 500 kilograms of enriched uranium, which was actually moved around the country, and this is the basis for at least 10 nuclear bombs.
So, during the first strike, as I understand, the supreme leader of Iran were killed, Ayatollah Khamenei, and United States and Israel both participated in this action, right? But how does it fit to the framework of international law?
We see a man, a supreme leader of a sovereign country that is calling for at least 30 years for the destruction of Israel. He made his lifetime goal to destruct Israel, to annihilate the Israeli people. We have, as I remind our viewers, we have no adjacent border with Iran. We are not sharing the same border. We're not sharing any ties with Iran. Just merely the fact that Israel exists. This person was openly calling for the destruction of Israel and did whatever he could with his power as supreme leader of Iran to destroy Israel. This person, this man, deserved to die.
So, was he recognized officially as some criminal or terrorist in some lists of terrorists?
I'm not aware if he was actually, designated as a terrorist in any of the lists, but definitely all the echelons that were under him, like the IRGC, the Revolutionary Guard, terrorist organization around the world, and especially those who are surrounding Israel, were definitely designated as terrorist organizations.
Well, it's just interesting that according to international law, you just made a precedent that some external powers can kill the leader of the sovereign country without any, lawful reason. So wouldn't that be a problem in the future to international system?
Well, if a leader is calling to the destruction of your country, openly calling for the destruction of your country, is doing whatever he can, whatever he has powers within his country, mobilizes whatever asset he has in his country to kill you, I think actions should be made.
Yes,
should be taken.
There should be some procedure. You need to designate him as a terrorist. You need to designate him as a target and say that we are able and we have a moral and lawful right to kill him. But if there is no designation, if there is no such a procedure, so I'm not sure that it fits to international law.
Many countries are seeing Iran as a country that is actively seeking for the destruction of Israel, actively perpetrating terror, actively funding terrorist organizations, by the way, not only in Israel or surrounding Israel, but around the world. So we always should rely, or we can try and rely on diplomatic corps, on international platforms, but eventually, when this doesn't work, a country must defend itself.
Okay, last year, after United States and Israel hit Iran hard, yes, and President Trump said that it's over. Iran would not be able to recreate these nuclear facilities anymore in the future. But right now, nevertheless, he started the war and Israel started the war. So, are you sure that Iran has such an abilities right now? One day before war, how was he able to recreate such a facilities?
Well, we thought that, as you asked, in a reasonable course for a country that was already, under attack and was already beaten once during June of 2025, would be reasonable and would take the proper course of action. But unfortunately, what we saw is the contrary. We saw that Iran is again seeking nuclear weapon, expediting all the processes, taking all its facilities underground, beyond the reach of monitoring, beyond the reach of the international community, beyond the reach of any kind of I would say, lawful activity. So we understood, together with the Americans, sharing the information, that the action should have been taken, and that's what we did.
Okay, we know that during last 10 to 15 years, Israel intelligence killed a lot of Iranian scientists. They're not combatants, but so does it fit to international humanitarian law? They're civilians. Is it okay to kill civilians?
I think a country like Israel that is under constant attack for the last almost 80 years since our establishment, and even before that, and especially from Iran in the last 50 years since the radical revolution in Iran, we are under constant threat. And we have to take any measure and any action that will actually safeguard the safety of Israeli people. We are living in a very hostile environment. Unfortunately, we have peace agreement only with Egypt and Jordan. But we saw that since October 23, we were fighting and combating more than seven fronts. So all in all, we are doing whatever we need to do to defend ourselves.
Critics often point that Israel have a very relatively high number of civilian casualties during fight in Gaza. For example, Ukraine in a war with Russia lost 150,000 soldiers and only 15,000 of civilians. A ratio 10 to 1, 10 soldiers, 1 civilian, right? And at the same time, in Gaza, some speakers say that every 1 killed terrorists and you have 2 killed civilians in Gaza. So it's a 20 times higher ratio of killed civilians in Gaza by Israel than by Russia in Ukraine. So what do you think about that?
Well, I denounce this comparison because, first of all, in Ukraine and Russia, these are 2 armies that are fighting. We are fighting a terrorist organization. You know, from 2000, when Hamas started firing at Israeli civilians, nobody was, counting, how many rockets actually hit Israel or didn't hit Israel. Actually, this is Hamas, a terrorist organization designated, referring to your previous questions, and still firing only at civilians. In 7th of October 2023, again, nobody counted how many terrorists killed civilians. And they were aiming at civilian neighborhoods, civilian, villages. And this was the aim of Hamas, actually, to kill as many civilians. And I also recall that 251 Israelis were kidnapped into the Gaza Strip. So when an army is fighting terrorists, which are embedded within a civilian environment, working from schools, from infirmaries, from hospitals, and this was all shown by the Israeli military to the international community. It was all shown. It was all documented. Yes, there are civilian casualties. We are regretting for every civilian casualties or for those who are not involved. But how can you say that a terrorist, which is taking his kind of uniform but still holding a gun, is a civilian? He is not a civilian. He is a terrorist.
Yes, but 30% of killed were children. It's a terrible tragedy. Don't you think so?
I agree. It's a terrible tragedy. We do whatever we can to preserve civilians, especially, of course, children. I think we're the only army. I'm sure that we are the only army who is giving a warning beforehand, telling the civilians to evacuate. We are sending messages via the phone. We are calling people. We are sending pamphlets, flyers to people, and doing whatever we can to actually preserve life. This is a unique approach by the Israeli army, which nobody is doing the same. By the way, we are preserving this attitude with all the arenas, with all the fronts that we are where we conduct our activities.
I heard you do the same right now in Lebanon, right?
We do.
Yeah. So how would you assess what happened in the girls' school in Iran? Because as I heard, 168 little girls died. And Americans they say that it was their rocket, but intelligence was Israeli. What happened there, and how would you assess that tragedy?
Well, of course, again, this is a tragedy, and if people who are not involved, civilians, girls, students, were involved, this is, of course, very, very tragic. I would claim that we have to wait for a full investigation that will actually look into all the aspects of this tragic event and will give its assessment and answers. Well,
I know that spin doctors and propaganda, American propaganda, would say that it was, that Iranians pretended that it was a school, but it was a military object. But if you would discover that it was a civilian object and it was real girls and someone made a mistake, would someone be, in jail or in court?
Well, again, this is an investigation that has to be made. I'm not sure what the outcome of the investigation will be made. There are proper bodies that should investigate this. And if somebody should be prosecuted at the end, so let be it. But again, we are sorry for loss of civilian lives. We're sorry for loss of innocent lives. But again, if you see the doctrine of terrorist organization and both the Iranian regime, they're hiding their I would say military activity, their terrorist activity behind what we call civilian facilities. We saw that numerous times, both in Gaza and both in Lebanon. So I'm I have some, I would say, doubts whether all targets are innocent.
No, I agree with that, but you can, we do understand that the little girls, they are not terrorists. And it looks like a military crime when you see the bodies of 168 little girls who they're innocent, but they died because of rocket of American military.
You are, I agree with that hitting a civilian target with innocent people is something that should not have happened. However, we do not know exactly what are the circumstances. We do not know exactly what was the, I would say, the operational picture at that time. That's why we should wait for a proper investigation that will give us the facts and will give us the true, I would say, nature of this kind of action.
What's the difference between your war against Iran and Russian war against Ukraine? Russia claims that Ukraine threatens its security, and you claim that Iran threatens your security. Can we compare these two situations, in your opinion?
I cannot compare because the situation of Israel is unique. We are threatened from near and far. Iran, throughout the years, has built a proxies organization that actually threaten Israel. If we look at Hezbollah in Lebanon, Lebanon is a sovereign country, right? And Hezbollah is a terrorist organization embedded within the politics of Lebanon, is actually controlling almost 40 to 50% of the country, had an arsenal of over 150,000 rockets. All are aimed and targeting Israeli soil. So again, not going in to compare the Russian and Ukrainian conflict and war, we are in a very unique position with Iran and with terrorist organizations that are proxies of Iran.
United States and Israel right now dominate the airspace in Iran. How do you think, is it possible that Israel and Iran would start a ground operation in Iran?
I cannot really assess this scenario. I hope not, and that we'll be able to achieve our goals, which are very clear. First of all, we want to take the ability of Iran to develop nuclear weapons. Second, we are threatened by ballistic missile threat. On a daily basis, Israel is heavily bombarded by rocket barrage. Some of them are with cluster bombs, which are again against the international law. And by the way, it's not only Israel. We saw that Iran is actually, spreading and expanding its attack areas all over the Gulf, all the way to Turkey and Azerbaijan and up to Oman. So I don't know if we'll need to go, into a ground operation, but I hope that Iranian regime will actually be toppled down and will have kind of a swift result in this campaign.
But honestly, what is the probability that now this Iranian regime would fall?
I don't want to assess the probability. We are creating, I would say, the conditions for the Iranian people to decide on their own faith. We saw what the regime had done within just 2 months. Again, not relating to what it has done for the last 50 years, but in 2 months, even maybe less, they killed almost 40,000 people of their own, just for people that were actually protesting against the regime.
But when a regime of Saddam Hussein in Iraq collapsed, and Americans left Iraq. It created conditions to creation of IGIL, Islamic State, right? A terrorist organization. Don't you think that if Iranian regime is toppled, that some more aggressive and stronger organizations can appear in the area, in this territory, and that would threaten your national security even in an even bigger scale?
Well, we consider the Iranian people as a very smart people, resilient, and definitely possible to be free of this tyranny, of this radical regime. And we are hoping that within reasonable time, the people can actually take over with a new government, with new possibilities. I believe that we also see the relieving of sanctions over Iran, so the economy can bloom, the economy can develop, and actually a better future is waiting for the Iranian people.
But right now they don't seem to be ready to, to take a power in their hands, Iranian people.
Well, again, this is their decision. We are attacking and targeting Iranian regime's headquarters, operatives, and infrastructure. At the end, this is a decision of the Iranian people.
What is the definition of strategic victory for Israel in this war?
So, first of all, again, nuclear weapon in the hands of a radical regime that is ready to sacrifice its own people, that is ready to fire on Israel and on neighboring countries, and then saying this is not us, or saying we are sorry, as we saw the Iranian president do. Taking away the ability to develop nuclear weapon is our priority and our primary target. Second is the ballistic missile program. We saw the capabilities of Iran, not only within Iran, but also in Hezbollah, as I mentioned before, with Hamas, and even the Houthis, which are in Yemen. You can imagine, 2,500 kilometers from Israel, we have a regime, we have some kind of an organization, a terrorist organization that is threatening Israel, 2,500 kilometers from Israel. So ballistic missile, nuclear program, and actually hurting the infrastructure of the radical regime.
Yeah. What is the then diplomatic exit strategy in this case? I mean that one day Prime Minister Netanyahu would go live and say, war is over, we're leaving and war is stopped, right? What is the diplomatic way to do the peace?
Well, I think first of all that the military action is still ongoing. And we have no time limit, no resource limit, working together with our American allies to actually achieve the goals that I've mentioned before. Once those goals are achieved, we can definitely embark in a diplomatic path. I'm sure that it will be Americans will be leading that, together with the international community, to actually stabilize the situation in the Gulf, in Iran and in the Gulf.
And interesting that, as I understand, Iran now is the object of attack from the American-Israeli side. But what actions of Iran would trigger even stronger military action against Iran? Is it even possible, considering that your former prime minister 50 years ago said that Israel doesn't have a nuclear weapon but would not hesitate to use it if necessary? I mean, what Iran should do to Israel to strike everything that it has against Iran? Is it possible at all?
Well, at the moment, the military plan is going, or the military action is going as planned. So with the strikes against Iranian regime, Iranian facilities, and I think in the next days we'll see the continuation and maybe even intensifying of this kind of attack or this kind of strikes against the Iranian facilities, against the Iranian regime. I cannot relate to the future actions by the Israeli and American forces, but I do hope that a decisive action and a decisive outcome will be actually resolved.
No, we know that President Trump is a very emotional man, but I heard this week that he implied that if we don't win by bombs, by traditional bombs, we can nuke them. So I think it was very strong words. But do you think that there is a probability that someone would strike a nuclear bomb against Iran?
Well, I have to say that President Trump is a very, very good friend of Israel. And we found in Washington a very reliable partner, as we always did. But with this president, it even grows beyond and even intensifies. I cannot relate to any action or plan that the president has, but I know that the coordination between the American Air Force and Army, especially CENTCOM, and the Israeli forces is very tight, is very close. And we see the results. We saw the results on the first day of strike, and we see it every day. It's amazing to see how those two armies, those two forces can actually combine and work together to achieve a very important goal.
So nothing is out of the table, right?
I don't know. I don't know what's on the table, so I cannot say if it's off the table.
I want to ask you about the relationship with Arab states. They are victims of Iranian counterattack right now. Do you have a connection with the Emirates, Saudis? What do they think about the Iranian counterattack? For example, do they blame you and Americans that you started this war and they became a victim, or they became even stronger anti-Iranian force in the region?
First of all, we have very good connections with the Abraham Accords countries, especially with the UAE and Bahrain, which are, of course, under heavy attack. The Americans have good connections with the Qataris and with the Saudis and with the Omanis. Of course, we have some contacts, maybe not direct contacts with the Qataris, because they also were part of our negotiations with Hamas during the last two and a half years. But definitely, Gulf countries, the GCC, plus Jordan, plus other countries are suffering from Iran, and now they see the real hazardous potential of Iran. If Iran would have had a nuclear weapon, you understand, and everybody that's watching us can understand that the situation was much more worse. On the for now, we see a defensive actions by the Gulf states, but I do not exclude that we'll see maybe a coalition in the future that actually surrounds Iran and actually preventing it from doing those malign activities that it's doing right now. No,
I mean that do they now blame you for beginning of this war?
No, I don't think they're. Well, we have, of course, we initiated, the attack on Saturday morning, but I don't think they're blaming us, because they see that we are doing the job that nobody did for the last 50 years. We are taking an imminent, real threat out of the table, and I think that the situation after this campaign will be a much more stabilized Gulf region and Middle East.
But your independent opinion, do you think that Dubai is over, or Dubai would flourish in the future again?
Well, my personal opinion, which is not very relevant. What we see is, first of all, the potential of Dubai and how it fulfilled its potential throughout the years. I'm sure, again, that this campaign will result in a more stabilized situation, in a more peaceful situation, with all the countries actually more balanced in their posture in the Gulf region. So eventually, I think that Dubai will be back to what it was before, of course, flourishing and promoting its economy.
Because for me, it looks like Iran now destroyed the reputation of Dubai as a safe haven, and that's a big problem for elites of many countries, right?
Mm-hmm. So yeah, security and the stability is very important. That's why we're taking those actions right now and actually fighting, I would say, the war of many other countries.
Yeah. And last question, how would you assess the position of Kazakhstan in this conflict? What did Kazakhstan during these 2 weeks?
Well, first of all, we are having a very good discussion with the government of Kazakhstan, with the administration in particular, and with the MFA. The messages that we saw that are going to the Gulf countries and to the region and to Israel are very balanced and are well preserved. We acknowledge the important role of Kazakhstan as I would say dominant country within Central Asia. It has a very important role today with stabilizing the situation in Central Asia, and maybe in the future it will also serve as a platform for discussion, for negotiation, and for further diplomacy. This is a very important role.
So you mean you have a positive assessment of Kazakhstan's position or neutral or?
Yes, we have a positive assessment. Again, we understand the I would say the constraints that every country has when it comes to its foreign policy, and we appreciate the foreign policy of Kazakhstan, which was preserved, I would say balanced, sometimes even neutral, and this is I would say a productive approach by Kazakhstan.
Okay, Mr. Ambassador, do you have something to add to this discussion? Because that was my last question.
Well, first of all, I want to thank you for this opportunity. I think in Israel we felt that this is a campaign that we had to start, that we had to go into. While living in Israel, you live under threat for many years, and this, for our future generations, we want to stop it. Iran is a very clear and eminent threat to Israel. We wanted to put it off the table, as you mentioned before. And I do hope, for the sake of the future generations, for our children and our grandchildren, that this will actually be the result of a more peaceful, more calm, more stabilized Middle East for all of us.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Ambassador. Құрметті достар, это было интервью с послом Израиля в Казахстане. Мы постарались задать сбалансированный, честный вопрос относительно того, что волнует нашу аудиторию. Я еще раз повторяю, мы инициативно пригласили иранскую сторону. Если она согласится, мы готовы предоставить ей площадку тоже. Если нет, мы сделали все, что могли. Комментируйте, ставьте лайки, подписывайтесь на наш канал. Всем доброго!